Have you heard about the mystery of the town, hidden from every map, not erased by time or disaster, but deliberately removed, as if someone decided the world was better off forgetting it ever existed? This isn't folklore passed down through generations, or campfire tales, embellished by eager storytellers. This is documented history that someone tried very hard to bury. And what makes it even more disturbing is that people are still disappearing there, in a place that officially doesn't exist. My name is Dr. Sarah Chen, and I'm a cartographer and historian specializing in lost settlements. I've spent 15 years tracking down forgotten towns, abandoned villages, and places that slipped through the cracks of recorded history. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for what I found when I started investigating Ashmore Ridge. It started 3 months ago, when I received a package at my university office. No return address, no note, just a worn leather journal and a single photograph. The photo showed a town square bustling with people, circa 1950s, based on the clothing and cars. Written on the back in faded blue ink: Ashmore Ridge, population 847, September 1957. I'd never heard of it, so I did what any researcher would do. I searched every database, every census record, every historical archive I could access. Nothing. No Ashmore Ridge in any state. No census data, no incorporation papers, no land deeds. It was as if the town had been systematically scrubbed from existence. But here's where it gets interesting. The journal belonged to a woman named Margaret Holloway, a schoolteacher who had lived in Ashmore Ridge. Her entries spanned from January 1957 to October of the same year. The early pages were mundane, pleasant even. Descriptions of her students, town festivals, recipes shared between neighbors. A normal American small town in the heartland. But as the months progressed, the tone shifted dramatically. By June, Margaret was writing about the children, how they'd stopped playing during recess, preferring instead to stand in groups perfectly still, staring at the woods beyond the schoolyard. How little Timothy Bradford had drawn the same picture every day for 2 weeks. A door in the ground with steps leading down into darkness. How Sarah Beth Miller had asked her, in the middle of a spelling lesson, if Miss Holloway knew what happened to people when they were forgotten. Do they just disappear, the child had asked, or do they turn into something else? Margaret wrote that she'd laughed it off, blamed it on overactive imaginations. But then the adults started acting strangely, too. The town's mayor, Herbert Chambers, had begun holding mandatory town meetings every evening at sunset. Attendance wasn't optional. Margaret noted that those who missed meetings would be visited by a wellness committee. Later that night, she never specified what the committee did, but she mentioned that the Johnsons, who'd skipped 3 meetings in a row, had sold their house within a week and left town in the middle of the night, leaving most of their possessions behind. July's entries became fragmented. Desperate, Margaret wrote about finding symbols carved into trees around the town. Spirals within spirals that hurt to look at for too long. She described how the town's church, which had been Methodist for 70 years, suddenly changed denominations to something she'd never heard of: the Congregation of the Beneath. Reverend Walsh, who'd been a gentle, soft-spoken man, now delivered sermons about the necessity of feeding the foundation, about how every town was built on sacrifice, and some towns knew it while others pretended otherwise. "We are the lucky ones," Margaret quoted him as saying. "We understand the contract." The August entries were where my academic curiosity turned to genuine unease. Margaret had discovered something in the town library while researching local history for her students. Ashmore Ridge had been founded in 1891 by a group of settlers led by a man named Josiah Ashmore. Standard frontier story, nothing unusual, except Margaret found a second set of records hidden in a false bottom of a filing cabinet that told a different story. According to these hidden documents, the original settlement had been established 2 miles west of the current town location. That first settlement had lasted only 6 months before it was abandoned. The official story was crop failure and harsh winter conditions, but Margaret found a letter written by Josiah Ashmore to his brother back east, dated December 1891, that painted a very different picture. "We found the door," Josiah had written. "God help us. We found it in the cavern beneath Miller's Creek. It was not built by human hands, brother. The symbols around its frame are older than our oldest texts. We tried to leave, tried to forget what we'd seen, but it wouldn't let us. Every night it calls, and those who hear the calling walk into the woods and don't return the same. If they return at all, we're moving the settlement, starting over 2 miles east. Perhaps distance will protect us. Perhaps if we build over different ground, we can escape its influence. But I fear we're only delaying the inevitable. Once you've opened a door, even just by seeing it, you can't close it again." The settlement had been rebuilt, renamed, and for 66 years, Ashmore Ridge had existed as a normal, thriving community. Margaret wrote that she'd asked the librarian, Mrs. Edith Crane, about the original settlement. The old woman had gone pale, locked the library doors, and told Margaret to burn the documents and never speak of them again. "The door doesn't care about distance," Mrs. Crane had whispered. "It's patient. It waits for the town to grow, to establish itself, to put down roots. And then, when enough people are invested, when enough lives are intertwined with the soil, it makes its presence known. We've been feeding it for decades. Miss Holloway, every disappearance, every unexplained death, every family that leaves in the night, we tell ourselves they moved away, started fresh somewhere else. But we know, deep down, we all know where they went." Margaret asked what they fed it. Mrs. Crane wouldn't answer directly, but she said something that Margaret underlined 3 times in her journal. "The foundation of every town is sacrifice. Most towns just don't realize they're still making payments." September's entries were sporadic, written in increasingly shaky handwriting. Margaret had started experiencing what she called the calling. She'd wake up in the middle of the night with an overwhelming urge to walk into the woods. She'd find herself standing at her front door, hand on the knob, with no memory of getting out of bed. One night she woke up in her nightgown on the edge of town, barefoot in the frost, facing the woods. A deputy had found her and driven her home, but he'd said nothing about why he was patrolling that particular spot at 3 in the morning, or why he didn't seem surprised to find her there. She wrote about the children becoming more withdrawn, more synchronized. They'd started speaking in unison during class, finishing each other's sentences, even when they were across the room from each other. They'd stopped making eye contact with adults, instead focusing on something just over everyone's shoulder, as if watching something the adults couldn't see. The town meetings had become increasingly bizarre. Mayor Chambers spoke in a monotone about civic duty and community bonds, but underneath his words, Margaret could hear something else, a rhythm, a pattern that made her teeth ache. She noticed that everyone swayed slightly as he spoke, and by the end of each meeting, she'd find she'd lost track of time. Meetings that felt like 20 minutes would turn out to have lasted 3 hours. October 3rd, 1957. That was Margaret's final entry. It was only 3 lines long. "They've chosen me for the renewal ceremony. I should be honored, they say. The children gave me a crown made of roots and wire. It cut my forehead, and they seemed pleased by the blood. Tonight we descend. If anyone finds this, don't look for Ashmore Ridge. It's already gone. Even if the buildings still stand, we've been gone for a long time." The journal ended there. No final entry, no explanation, just those 3 lines and then blank pages. I spent weeks trying to verify Margaret Holloway's existence. No teaching certificates, no social security records, no birth certificate. It was as if she'd never existed either. But the journal was real, physical, tangible. The handwriting was consistent throughout, showing genuine degradation of penmanship Toward the end, the ink had aged appropriately. This wasn't a hoax. This was a genuine artifact from a place that had been erased. I became obsessed. I cross-referenced the photograph with architectural databases, trying to identify the buildings. The style suggested Midwest, probably Missouri or Kansas, based on the courthouse design. I used geographic profiling based on Margaret's descriptions of the landscape. Rolling hills, deciduous forests, a creek called Miller's Creek. I narrowed it down to a region in southern Missouri. Then, I did something I probably shouldn't have. I contacted a colleague who works with satellite imaging. I had him search the region for signs of settlement patterns that might have been abandoned in the late 1950s. It took 3 weeks, but he found something. A grid pattern in the forest canopy, visible only in certain wavelengths. The trees that had grown over what used to be streets were younger than the surrounding forest, suggesting cleared land that had been reforested approximately 60 to 70 years ago. I had coordinates. I had a location. And despite every rational part of my brain screaming at me to leave it alone, I decided to go there. The drive took 14 hours. The coordinates led me deep into the Mark Twain National Forest, down increasingly deteriorating roads, until I was on barely maintained fire trails. My GPS lost signal about 5 miles from the target location. My cell phone followed soon after. I'd brought physical maps, a compass, and plenty of supplies. I'm not reckless, just determined. I had to hike the last 3 miles. The forest was wrong. I noticed it immediately. The trees grew in odd patterns, all leaning slightly in the same direction, as if bowing toward some central point. The underbrush was minimal, making it easy to walk, but also creating an unnatural openness. No birds sang, no squirrels chattered. The only sound was my breathing and my footsteps on the leaf litter. Then I found the first building, or what was left of it. A collapsed structure, mostly consumed by vegetation, but I could make out the remains of a front porch, a brick chimney. I checked my GPS unit. According to the coordinates, I was on what would have been Main Street. I started seeing more ruins, foundations where houses had stood, the remnants of a water tower, rusted and tilted, a stop sign, faded but still readable, lying in the undergrowth. Ashmore Ridge had existed, and someone had left it to rot. I found the town square around noon. The courthouse from the photograph was still partially standing, though the roof had collapsed and trees grew through the windows. I could see where the streets had been, now just depressions in the ground covered with moss, and in the center of the square was a monument, a granite obelisk about 10 feet tall, weathered but intact. I approached it carefully, my heart pounding. There was an inscription, but it wasn't what I expected. No dedication to founders or war dead. Instead, carved in clean, precise letters, in gratitude for the bargain kept, 1891 to 1957. May those who remember keep silent. Below that were names, hundreds of names, carved in smaller text, covering all 4 sides of the monument. I found Margaret Holloway's name near the bottom. Above hers, Timothy Bradford, Sarah Beth Miller, Mayor Herbert Chambers, Mrs. Edith Crane, all the people she'd mentioned in her journal, and many, many more. I was taking photographs when I heard it, a humming. Low, rhythmic, coming from somewhere beneath my feet. The ground vibrated slightly with each pulse. I stepped back from the monument, and the sensation faded. Stepped forward and it returned, stronger. Something was under the town square, something that was still active. I should have left then. That was the moment to pack up, hike back to my car, and report my findings from the safety of my university office. But I've always been too curious. For my own good, I started searching the ruins, looking for any kind of entrance, any indication of what might be beneath the town. I found it behind what had once been the church. The building was almost completely collapsed, but the basement entrance was still accessible. Hidden by a fallen section of wall, stone steps led down into darkness, and carved into every step, spirals within spirals, the same symbols Margaret had described seeing in the trees. I had a flashlight, I had pepper spray, I had a complete absence of common sense. I went down. The basement was larger than it should have been, extending far beyond the footprint of the church above. The walls were stone, but not modern construction. These stones were old, shaped by hand, fitted together with incredible precision, and they were covered in carvings, not religious imagery, not anything I recognized from any culture I'd studied. These symbols seemed to shift when I wasn't looking directly at them, creating new patterns in my peripheral vision. The humming was louder down here, resonating through the stone. I could feel it in my chest, in my bones. It had a rhythm, almost like breathing, in and out, patient and endless. The basement corridor led deeper, sloping downward at a gentle angle. I followed it, marking my path with chalk. Professional protocol for cave exploration, even though this was clearly man-made, or at least I hoped it was man-made. The alternative was worse. I walked for what felt like 15 minutes, though my sense of time had become unreliable. The humming grew stronger with each step, and I started noticing side passages branching off from the main corridor. I shined my light down one and saw what looked like a room. Inside were personal belongings, suitcases, clothing, toys, a child's bicycle, all arranged neatly, as if someone had carefully stored them for safekeeping. But they were old, from the 1950s based on the styles. These were the possessions of Ashmore Ridge's residents, the things they'd left behind, or the things that had been collected after they disappeared. I kept moving, drawn forward by a compulsion I didn't fully understand. The main corridor opened into a massive underground chamber. My flashlight couldn't reach the far walls or the ceiling. The space was enormous, carved from solid rock, and in the center stood a door. Not a natural formation, not a mining entrance. A door, 15 feet tall, made of some dark material that absorbed light. The frame was covered in the spiral symbols, thousands of them, overlapping and interweaving in patterns that made my eyes water. And the door was slightly open, just a crack, with absolute blackness beyond. The humming was coming from the door, or more accurately, from whatever was behind it. The rhythm pulsed through the chamber, and I realized with horror that my heartbeat had synchronized with it. In and out, in and out. On the ground in front of the door was a circle of stones, and within that circle were objects, recent objects, a cell phone, a wallet, a woman's shoe, a child's stuffed animal. These weren't from 1957, these were contemporary, within the last few years. People were still coming here, or being brought here. That's when I heard the voices, coming from above, from the entrance I'd used. Multiple people, moving with purpose. I killed my flashlight and pressed myself against the wall of the chamber, my heart racing. They came with their own lights, a dozen figures in dark clothing, moving in single file down the corridor. They entered the chamber and formed a circle around the stone ring, facing the door. I couldn't see their faces, but I could hear them speaking in unison, words in a language I didn't recognize. One figure stepped forward, larger than the others, carrying something. My blood went cold when I realized it was a person, unconscious or drugged, draped over the figure's shoulder. They laid the person inside the stone circle, arranging them carefully, almost reverently. The humming intensified. The crack in the door widened, just slightly, and a smell wafted out, decay and copper and something else, something ancient and hungry. The figures continued their chanting, and the person in the circle began to stir, trying to sit up. That's when one of the figures turned in my direction. Though I couldn't see their face clearly, I knew they'd spotted me. They pointed, and 3 others broke from the circle, heading toward my position. I ran. I don't remember the decision to run, only the blind panic, the primal need to get out of that place. I sprinted back up the corridor, not caring about the noise, not caring about anything except escape. Behind me, I could hear footsteps, steady and unhurried. They weren't chasing me, they were following, confident they could catch up whenever they wanted. I burst from the church basement into daylight, yasping, disoriented. The sun was setting. I'd been underground for hours, not minutes. I ran toward where I'd left my pack, grabbed it without breaking stride, and crashed through the forest toward my car. The forest that had been silent before now seemed alive with movement, shapes darting between trees, always just out of clear view. I could hear that humming following me, growing louder, the rhythm of the door's breath chasing me through the woods. I made it to my car as darkness fell. My hands shook so badly, I could barely get the key in the ignition. The engine turned over, and I floored the accelerator, not caring about the rough trail, not caring about anything except distance. I didn't stop driving until I crossed the state line. Only then did I pull into a rest stop, lock my doors, and try to process what I'd seen. That was 2 weeks ago. I returned to my university, filed my field notes, and tried to continue with my normal research. But things aren't normal. I've started noticing patterns. Students who look at me too long, colleagues who ask too many questions about my trip. Last week, I received an email from an address I didn't recognize. No text, just an attachment, a photograph of me standing in the town square of Ashmore Ridge, taken from an angle that suggested someone was watching from the courthouse ruins. I never saw anyone else there, at least not until I went underground. Yesterday, I found a stone on my office desk, small, smooth, carved with a single spiral symbol, the same symbols from the door. I know I locked my office when I left the previous evening. The building has security cameras, but when I checked the footage, there's a gap. 4 hours of recording simply missing, replaced with static. And every night for the past week, I've woken up at exactly 3:47 a.m. with an overwhelming urge to drive south, to go back, to finish what I started. I've started sleeping in my car in public parking lots because I don't trust myself alone anymore. Last night, I woke up behind the wheel, engine running, already heading toward the highway. I had no memory of getting in the car. I've been researching, trying to understand what I found. The best I can determine is that Josiah Ashmore and his original settlers discovered something that predated human civilization in North America, something that had been waiting in that cave for thousands of years. They made a bargain, the specifics of which I can only guess at: protection, prosperity, success for their town, in exchange for regular sacrifices. For 66 years, Ashmore Ridge fed the thing behind the door. Voluntarily or not, people disappeared into those woods, into that chamber, through that crack in the door, and the town thrived because of it, until 1957, when something changed. Maybe they tried to stop, maybe they refused to continue the bargain, or maybe the thing behind the door decided it wanted more. The entire town vanished. 847 people, gone overnight, and someone, some organization or entity, scrubbed every record of Ashmore Ridge from existence, made it so that no one would look for those people. No one would ask questions. They just disappeared, and the world was encouraged to forget they'd ever existed. But the door is still there, still open, and based on what I saw, the bargain is still being kept, just by different people now. People who come from elsewhere, who've taken on the responsibility of feeding whatever waits in the darkness. I've tried to tell people. My department chair told me to take a sabbatical, that I was clearly stressed from overwork. A colleague I trusted looked at my evidence and returned it the next day, suggesting I'd mistaken a natural cave formation for something more sinister. When I tried to file a police report about the unconscious person I saw, the officer took my statement, but told me that without specific evidence of a crime, there wasn't much they could do. No one wants to believe, or maybe they've been told not to believe. I'm writing this account and uploading it to multiple platforms, sending copies to journalists, historians, anyone who might listen. I'm including the coordinates, the photographs, scans of Margaret Holloway's journal. If something happens to me, if I disappear like the residents of Ashmore Ridge, At least there will be a record, because I can feel it now. The calling. It's not just at night anymore. It's constant. A whisper at the back of my mind, telling me to come back, to see what's behind the door, to understand. The spiral symbols appear in my dreams, rearranging themselves into patterns that feel like instructions, like a map, showing me how to open the door fully. Part of me wants to. Part of me desperately wants to know what's on the other side. What could inspire such devotion and such horror? What could be worth the sacrifice of an entire town? But I remember the smell, decay and copper and ancient hunger. I remember the way the door absorbed light, the way the darkness beyond it seemed thick, almost solid, and I remember the person in the stone circle, just beginning to wake up, unaware of what was about to happen to them. The humming hasn't stopped since I left Ashmore Ridge. I hear it all the time now, in quiet moments, in the background of every sound. My heartbeat still matches its rhythm, in and out, patient and endless. I've made arrangements, my research, my evidence. Everything is set to be released automatically if I don't check in every 48 hours. I've told people where I went, what I found. I've done everything I can to ensure that Ashmore Ridge can't be forgotten again. But tonight is different. Tonight, the calling is stronger than ever. I'm in my car as I finish writing this, parked outside my apartment. The engine is running, my hands are on the wheel, and every instinct I have is screaming at me to drive south, to return to that place, to walk back down those stone steps, through that corridor into that chamber, to step into the stone circle, to understand. I can see figures in my rearview mirror. 3 people standing under the streetlight, not moving, just watching. They've been there for 20 minutes. When I first noticed them, I called the police. The dispatcher said she'd send someone. That was 15 minutes ago. The figures haven't moved. They're just waiting. My phone just buzzed. A text from an unknown number. The door remembers you. Come home. I'm uploading this now, sending it everywhere I can. If you're reading this, if you found this account, please listen. Don't look for Ashmore Ridge. Don't try to verify my research. Don't go to those coordinates. Whatever is there, whatever waits behind that door, it doesn't need more people to remember it. It needs to be forgotten. But I don't think it can be forgotten, not anymore, because I've realized something in these past 2 weeks, something that terrifies me more than anything I saw underground. Ashmore Ridge wasn't the only town. It couldn't have been. One bargain, one door, one sacrifice point wouldn't require the elaborate infrastructure of silence I've encountered, the systematic erasure, the coordinated effort to keep people from asking questions. It's too organized, too practiced. How many other towns have disappeared? How many other places have been scrubbed from maps and memories? How many other doors are there, scattered across the country, each one patiently waiting, each one still being fed? The figures outside my car are closer now. I didn't see them move, but they're definitely closer. 4 of them now, not 3. They're forming a semicircle around my vehicle. The humming is so loud, I can barely think. My phone screen is glitching, symbols appearing and disappearing in the text, spirals within spirals. I have to go. I have to see. I have to understand what's behind the door. The calling isn't just in my mind anymore. It's in my bones, in my blood, in every cell of my body. I've been marked, claimed, chosen, just like Margaret Holloway, just like the 847 residents of Ashmore Ridge. I'm sorry. I tried to warn you. I tried to expose this. But some doors, once you've seen them, once you've heard them breathe, you can't turn away from. They've always been open, just waiting for someone to notice, waiting for someone to remember. And now, I remember everything. The figures are at my windows now, pressing their hands against the glass. Their faces are blank, smooth, featureless, but I can feel them smiling. I need to tell you more before I go, before I lose myself completely to the calling. There are things I discovered in my research that I haven't shared yet, details that might save someone else from making my mistakes, or perhaps they'll only draw more people into the web that's been spun across this country for over a century. After I returned from Ashmore Ridge that first time, before the calling became unbearable, I went deeper into the archives. I contacted colleagues across the country, historians who specialized in American settlements and westward expansion. I asked a simple question: were there any towns in their regions that had disappeared from records between 1890 and 1960? Settlements that seemed to have been deliberately erased rather than simply abandoned. The responses I received were disturbing in their consistency. A colleague in Oregon told me about Millbrook, a logging town that vanished in 1923. All 412 residents gone overnight, the buildings left intact, personal belongings still in homes. The State Forest Service claimed there had never been a town at that location, despite photographs and letters proving otherwise. In Nebraska, there was Harrow's End, population 691, last recorded in the 1931 census, and completely absent from the 1940 census. When researchers tried to investigate, they found the land had been purchased by a private foundation that refused all requests for access. Pennsylvania had 3 such towns. Louisiana had 2. Idaho had one that disappeared as recently as 1989. Though that incident was blamed on a cult mass suicide, despite no bodies ever being recovered, the pattern was undeniable. Across America, small towns had been vanishing for over 100 years, and each disappearance had been followed by a systematic erasure of records. I created a map, plotting every disappearance I could verify. The pattern that emerged made my blood run cold. The towns formed a rough grid across the United States, each one approximately 200 to 300 miles from the next. Too regular to be coincidence, too precise to be random. Someone, or something, had been establishing these settlements deliberately, spacing them out like nodes in a network. But a network for what purpose? I found part of the answer in the archives of a defunct newspaper, the Millbrook Observer, which had somehow survived in a university collection, despite the town's official non-existence. The final issue, dated September 15, 1923, contained an editorial written by the editor, a man named Charles Whitmore. He wrote about strange occurrences in the town, about how the founding families had become secretive and controlling, about mandatory gatherings in the woods that no one was allowed to discuss. His final paragraph read, "There is something beneath this town that was here long before we arrived. The founders knew about it, made arrangements with it, and now those arrangements are coming due. I fear for my neighbors. I fear for my family, but most of all, I fear that Millbrook is not unique, that this bargain has been made in many places, and that we are all just cattle being raised for slaughter." The newspaper never printed another issue. Charles Whitmore's name appears nowhere in historical records. After that date, I started looking into the founders of these disappeared towns, trying to find connections. That's when I discovered the Society. It went by different names in different eras: the Brotherhood of the Western Door, the Foundation for American Settlement, the New Territories Commission, but the members overlapped consistently. Wealthy industrialists, politicians, religious leaders, all involved in westward expansion and town planning. In the late 1800s, the Society's official mission was to establish stable, self-sufficient communities in frontier territories. But their private correspondence, what little of it survived in scattered archives, told a different story. They wrote about securing the threshold points, about maintaining the balance, about ensuring the covenant remained honored. They referred to something called the substrate, a network of interconnected spaces beneath the Earth's surface, places where reality was thin, and things that should not exist could press through if properly invited. Josiah Ashmore had been a member of the Society. So had the founders of Millbrook, Harrow's End, And every other town that had vanished, they'd been given maps, shown locations where the substrate was closest to the surface, places where doors could be opened, and bargains struck in exchange for prosperity and protection. The towns would serve as feeding points, regular sacrifices given to whatever waited in the darkness below. For decades, it had worked. The towns thrived, grew wealthy, attracted settlers. The residents, most of them anyway, remained ignorant of the true cost of their prosperity. A few disappearances could be explained away. A few deaths could be attributed to accidents or natural causes. And those who knew, those who maintained the bargain, kept silent because the alternative was worse. But what happened when a town tried to stop? What happened when the residents, like those in Ashmore Ridge, discovered the truth and refused to continue the sacrifices? I found a letter written by a society member in 1958. The year after Ashmore Ridge vanished, he wrote to another member, warning him that the Ashmore situation has been resolved, but at great cost. When a threshold point is abandoned, the door does not close, it opens wider. We had to take drastic measures to contain the breach, and even now, we cannot be certain we succeeded. The town has been erased, but the door remains. We've established a new maintenance protocol, volunteers from outside who understand the necessity. But I fear we've set a dangerous precedent. If word spreads that rebellion is possible, even if futile, others may try, and each failed rebellion weakens the barriers further. The society still exists. I'm certain of it now. They're the ones who scrubbed Ashmore Ridge from existence, who maintain the network of doors, who recruit and manage the people I saw in that underground chamber. They've been operating for over 130 years, spanning generations, preserving knowledge that most of humanity has forgotten or never knew. Knowledge about what lives in the deep places, what waits behind doors that should never have been opened. I tried to find evidence of current society members, but they've become experts at covering their tracks. Shell corporations, anonymous foundations, layers upon layers of bureaucracy designed to obscure their activities. But I did find something, a photograph from a congressional reception in 2019, showing several prominent senators and business leaders. In the background, partially obscured by a column, I spotted a man wearing a lapel pin. Small, easy to miss, but I recognized the symbol. 3 spirals interlinked, the same pattern carved around the door in Ashmore Ridge. They're still operating, still maintaining the doors, still feeding the things that wait below. And they know about me. They've known since I uploaded Margaret Holloway's journal. Probably earlier, they've been watching, waiting to see what I'd do, whether I'd become a threat that needed to be eliminated, or whether the calling would solve their problem for them. The calling always wins, eventually. I found records of other researchers who got too close, who discovered too much. They all ended up going back to the door, walking down into the darkness voluntarily. The society doesn't need to kill investigators. The doors themselves take care of that problem. I'm uploading this now, adding these new details to my earlier account. Maybe it will help someone. Maybe it will just draw more people into the trap. But I can't keep silent, can't let this knowledge die with me. The figures outside my car have multiplied. There are at least a dozen now, forming a complete circle around my vehicle. They're all wearing the same dark clothing, the same featureless masks. Or maybe those aren't masks. Maybe that's what happens when you serve the door long enough. Maybe you become smoothed out, your identity erased, your humanity worn away, until you're just another servant of the substrate. I can see other people in the parking lot, normal people going about their lives, and none of them seem to notice the figures surrounding my car. A couple walks past, laughing, completely oblivious to the circle of watchers just a few feet away. Either the figures are invisible to everyone except me, or everyone else has learned not to see them. Both possibilities are equally terrifying. My phone is glitching more severely now. The text keeps shifting into those spiral symbols, and I can barely read what I'm typing, but I need to warn you about one more thing. The most important thing I've learned: the doors aren't just scattered randomly across America, they're spreading. Every time a door is fed, every time a sacrifice is made, the substrate expands slightly. The places where reality is thin grow thinner, and eventually, if enough doors are maintained for long enough, the barriers between our world and whatever exists in the substrate will collapse entirely. The society believes they're controlling this process, managing it, keeping it contained, but I've read their private correspondence. I've seen the fear hidden beneath their clinical language. They know they're not in control. They haven't been in control for decades, maybe longer. They're just trying to slow the inevitable, buying time with sacrifices, and hoping that someone, someday, will figure out how to actually close the doors permanently. But doors that have been open for over a century can't be closed. The things on the other side won't allow it. They're patient, ancient, and hungry, and they've been waiting for so long, gathering strength, preparing for the day when they can finally push through completely. Ashmore Ridge was a preview. 847 people disappeared in a single night, consumed by the door when the town tried to break its bargain. That's the price of rebellion. But what happens when the society can no longer maintain the other doors? What happens when the network of sacrifices breaks down? When there aren't enough volunteers to keep feeding the substrate? I think we're approaching that moment. The society is old, its members dying off, and recruiting new members has become increasingly difficult. In the age of information, too many records, too many ways for secrets to leak. The internet was supposed to make their work easier, but instead, it's made it nearly impossible to keep people silent, and the doors are getting hungrier. The humming I hear constantly, it's not just the Ashmore Ridge door anymore. I can hear others, a chorus of breathing from beneath the earth, a symphony of ancient hunger. They're all connected, all part of the same vast entity or network of entities, and they're all waiting for the barriers to fail. I don't know what will happen when they do. Maybe nothing. Maybe the hoarders of the substrate will pour into our world and consume everything. Maybe they'll be content with just a few more cities, a few more sacrifices, or maybe they'll take their time, spreading slowly, converting people gradually, until humanity serves them willingly, until we're all smoothed out and featureless, servants of the dark below. The figures are opening my car doors now. I didn't hear them unlock, didn't see anyone reach for the handles, but the doors are swinging open one by one. Cool night air rushes in, carrying that smell, decay and copper and ancient hunger. The smell of the door. They're reaching for me with hands that don't quite look like hands anymore, more like suggestions of hands, outlines that my brain interprets as human, even though nothing about them is human. I'm not going to resist. The calling is too strong now, and part of me, the part that became a researcher in the first place, desperately wants to understand, wants to see what's behind the door, wants to know what all those people throughout history have been sacrificed to maintain. Maybe that curiosity is what the door uses to catch people like me. Maybe it's been engineered specifically to appeal to those who ask too many questions. Or maybe we're all susceptible. Eventually, maybe the door calls to everyone, and it's just a matter of time before we answer. I'm going to leave my phone here in the car, recording. Maybe the footage will be useful to someone. Maybe it will just show an empty parking lot, the figures invisible to the camera's eye, but at least there will be a record of when I left, where I went, what happened to me. The road south is calling. Ashmore Ridge is calling. The door is calling, and I'm answering. If anyone finds this, if anyone reads all of this and decides to investigate despite everything I've said, I have one final piece of advice. Look for the symbols. The triple spirals appear wherever the doors exist, carved into trees, scratched into buildings, painted on signs. They're everywhere once you learn to see them, marking the threshold points, warning the aware and luring the curious. Avoid them. Don't try to understand them. Don't investigate the towns that have disappeared, or the people who maintain the doors. Just live your life, stay in the light, and pray that the barriers hold for a few more years, because when they finally fail, when the substrate breaks through completely, no one will be safe. Not the society members who thought they could control it, not the innocents who never knew about the doors, not even the faithful servants who spent their lives feeding the hunger below. The door is always hungry, and eventually, it will consume everything. I'm stepping out of the car now. The figures are forming a procession, leading me toward the street. I can see my reflection in a shop window as I pass, and I barely recognize myself. My eyes have that same glazed quality I saw in the photographs of Ashmore Ridge residents just before the town vanished. I'm smiling, but it's not my smile. It's the door's smile wearing my face. The humming is beautiful now. I don't know why I ever found it disturbing. It's the sound of truth, of reality stripped of comfortable lies. It's the sound of the universe breathing, in and out, patient and endless. There are more people joining the procession. I recognize some of them from the parking lot. The couple who walked past my car, the security guard from a nearby building, the teenager who was smoking by the dumpster, all of us walking south, all of us smiling, all of us called home. We're not the first, we won't be the last. The door has been calling since before humanity learned to write, since before we crawled out of caves and built civilizations. We've just been convenient, easy to organize into groups, easy to lead to slaughter, but the door doesn't need us specifically. It will still be here long after we're gone, calling to whatever comes next. Ashmore Ridge is waiting. Margaret Holloway is waiting. All 847 residents are waiting, along with the thousands from other towns, other times, other doors. We'll join them soon, smoothed out and featureless, our identities consumed, our memories absorbed into the vast hunger of the substrate. And maybe that's not such a terrible fate. Maybe there's peace in the darkness, release in the consuming. Maybe the door offers something we can't find in the light, a truth too vast and terrible for consciousness to contain. Or maybe I'm just telling myself comfortable lies. As the end approaches, the city is falling behind us now. We're walking through suburbs, through industrial parks, heading for the highway. No one stops us. No one even seems to see us. Cars drive past, their headlights washing over our procession, but the drivers don't react. We're already gone as far as they're concerned, already erased from the world above. I wonder if I'll see Margaret Holloway when I reach the door, if she'll recognize me from her journal, the researcher who tried to tell her story, or if she's been consumed so completely that nothing remains but hunger and the endless rhythm of the door's breathing. I wonder if I'll scream when I step into the stone circle, when I feel whatever waits behind the door reach out and pull me through, or if I'll go quietly, smiling, grateful to finally understand. The procession is singing now, all of us in unison, words in that language I don't recognize but somehow know. It's a hymn of sorts, a prayer to the dark below, an acknowledgement of the bargain that was made before any of us were born, and will continue long after we're forgotten. We're on the highway now, walking down the shoulder, ignoring the vehicles that pass. The city lights are fading behind us. Ahead, only darkness and the road south, to Ashmore Ridge, to the door, to home. This is my final entry. My phone is about to die, the battery drained by something that has nothing to do with power consumption. The symbols are covering my screen completely now, spirals within spirals, and I can barely see to type. If you're reading this, remember what I've said. Remember the doors, the society, the substrate. Remember that some mysteries should stay buried, some questions should never be asked, but most importantly, remember Ashmore Ridge. Remember the town that doesn't exist, the 847 people who were erased, and the researcher who tried to save them, but became just another sacrifice instead. Remember us, because once we step through the door, once we're consumed by the darkness below, Memory is all that remains, and even that will fade eventually. The door is always hungry, and it's calling you too, whether you know it yet or not. We're all walking toward it, some faster than others, but all heading in the same direction. In and out, patient and endless. I'm home. The door is opening, and I finally understand.